Hello and welcome to Mickeyology, where we take Disney movies a little bit too seriously. I'm Austin Rathel, history teacher and lifelong Disney devotee, and today we are comparing Disney's Tangled with Rapunzel, the fairy tale story that inspired it. Rapunzel is one of the many stories collected by the Grimm brothers and first published in the early 1800s in Grimm's Fairy Tales. This was a collection of European folk stories that would be revised and republished many times over the years. For this video, we will be examining both the 1812 and 1857 versions of the Rapunzel story as translated into English by D.L. Ashliman. So, how similar is the folk story with the Disney version? The original Rapunzel is a short folk tale, only about 1,500 words long. It's a simple and rather tragic story that features a cast of only 7 characters. Tangled, on the other hand, is a much more complex story that's told as a feature-length animated musical. And while the original Rapunzel story is told to us by an omniscient narrator, Tangled is narrated by Flynn Rider, one of the story's central characters. Almost every character from the original fairy tale appears in Tangled. Rapunzel, her love interest, her parents, and the sinister Gothel all appear in both versions of the story. However, Tangled features many new characters that don't appear in the original, including Pascal, Maximus, the Stabbington brothers, and the Royal Guards. Disney also changes certain characters, and while they play basically the same role in the Disney version of the story as they do in the original, Disney changes some aspects of their identities and backstories. For example, in the original 1812 story, Gothel is actually a fairy, and in the 1857 version, she is a sorceress. But Disney makes her an ordinary woman whose only magical quality is the fact that she lives an unnaturally long life thanks to the powers of a magical flower. Disney takes the original's unnamed prince character and turns him into Flynn Rider, an orphan-turned-thief whose real name is Eugene Fitzherbert. Rapunzel's parents are commoners in the original version, but royalty in Tangled. Disney also changes Rapunzel from a commoner who marries a prince to a princess who marries a commoner. There are also 2 characters from the original version that don't appear at all in the Disney film. However, let's not mention them until we examine the plot. The major plot points of Rapunzel and Tangled are the same. Both stories begin with a couple who are expecting their first child. They acquire a plant which angers a woman named Gothel, who later takes their child away. The child is named Rapunzel and grows up locked away in a tower, but uses her long golden hair to allow Gothel to enter the tower whenever she wants to. Eventually, a man happens upon the tower, enters it, and meets Rapunzel. The two fall in love, but this angers Gothel, who tries to keep the couple apart. Rapunzel's beloved is injured, Rapunzel's hair is cut, but eventually Rapunzel and her true love escape the tower and go to live in the kingdom as prince and princess. The details of the 2 stories, however, are very different. In the original, the expectant couple aren't royalty, and the plant they take isn't a magic golden flower. Instead, they are commoners who live near a garden owned by a sorceress. One day, the woman looks out her window and sees a beautiful crop of Rapunzel growing in the garden. That's right, Rapunzel is the name of a plant, and even though it was made famous by a fairy tale, it's quite real. Anyway, the woman begins to crave Rapunzel, and her cravings become so severe that she becomes ill. To appease her, her husband hops over the garden wall, steals some of the Rapunzel, and brings it back to his wife. His wife makes herself a delicious Rapunzel salad, but after eating it, she only begins to crave more of the plant, so her husband goes back into the garden. This time, the sorceress who owns the garden catches the thief and becomes angry. However, she agrees to let the man take her Rapunzel in exchange for his unborn child. Fearing the sorceress, the man agrees, and when the child is born, Gothel names her Rapunzel and takes her away. When the girl is 12 years old, Gothel takes her away to live in a tower that has no staircase and no doors, just a single small window at the top. Where the tower came from and how Gothel and Rapunzel managed to get inside it the first time is anyone's guess. Rapunzel stays locked in her tower and grows into a beautiful young woman. One day, a prince goes riding by and hears Rapunzel singing. The song captures his heart so completely that he returns to the tower, and by spying on Gothel from behind a tree, he learns that if he just shouts the words, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair," that strands of golden hair will come down from the window, allowing him to climb up the tower to the top. He does this and meets the beautiful girl inside the tower. He is so smitten with Rapunzel that he proposes marriage to her. She is frightened of him at first, but quickly agrees to marry him. However, the only problem is she needs a way to get down from the tower. So she asks the prince to continue visiting her, but to bring her a single strand of silk each time he comes so that she may fashion a ladder for herself. Once her ladder is complete, she says she will climb down from the tower and allow him to take her away on his horse. Now, me personally, I probably would have asked for more than one strand of silk, or maybe ask the guy to just bring a ladder with him, but that's not the approach that she takes. The prince continues to visit, but one day Rapunzel slips up and spills her secret about the prince to Gothel. Gothel becomes enraged, and she grabs Rapunzel's hair and cuts it with a pair of scissors. Then she takes Rapunzel away from the tower and leaves her in the wilderness to suffer. How exactly the two get down from the tower without the help of Rapunzel's hair is anyone's guess. Gothel then somehow gets back into the top of the tower and ties Rapunzel's hair then to a hook outside the window, and she waits for the prince. The prince arrives, calls out for the hair, and Gothel lets it down, allowing him to climb up to the window. But when he reaches her, Gothel tells the prince that Rapunzel is gone and he will never see her again. Hearing this news, the prince, in despair, leaps from the tower and lands on thorns that poke out both of his eyes. He then wanders in the forest, wailing for his lost love, and subsists on grass and roots. Years later, as he's still wandering in the woods, the prince hears Rapunzel's voice, and the two are reunited. It turns out that Rapunzel has been living in the woods this entire time as well, but she's not alone. She has given birth to twins. How she originally became pregnant is not anyone's guess. Rapunzel weeps at the sight of her beloved prince, and two of her tears fall into his eyes, magically restoring his sight. Now healed and reunited with his love, the prince takes Rapunzel back to the kingdom where they live happily and satisfied. When it came time to tell their version of Rapunzel, Disney made some major changes to the story. They gave Rapunzel's hair magical powers and made Rapunzel herself a more proactive character, setting her on a quest to see the floating lanterns. They also showed the audience that Rapunzel could leave the tower any time, but she chooses not to because of her respect for Gothel's rules. Disney also chose to have the relationship between Rapunzel and her suitor develop more gradually than it does in the original. They also gave Gothel some comeuppance at the end, which she doesn't get in the Grimm story. Disney chose to reunite Rapunzel with her parents, who are much more likable in this version, and they added a secret staircase inside the tower, which makes the whole tower situation a lot more logical. Disney also added a bar scene, a crew of lovable scoundrels, and animal sidekicks, ingredients that can take any story from good to great. Disney also opted not to blind the love interest, which makes their story a lot less gruesome, and they cut Rapunzel's pregnancy out of the film. While this might seem like a move only a modern movie company would make, Disney wasn't the first to sanitize the story. The Grimm brothers themselves made the story more family-friendly when they published their revised version in 1857. You see, in the 1812 manuscript, Gothel only finds out about Rapunzel's lover when the girl asks Gothel why her clothes are becoming so tight. Gothel realizes that Rapunzel must be pregnant, something Rapunzel herself doesn't seem to comprehend, and she deduces that Rapunzel must have a man in her life. In the 1857 version, Rapunzel simply hoists Gothel up to the tower one day and then asks why Gothel is so much more difficult to pull up to the top than the prince who comes to visit her. Gothel then becomes enraged, presumably because Rapunzel has deceived her, but perhaps also because Rapunzel made a crack about her weight. In the 1857 version, it also says the prince, quote, wandered about in the forest, eating nothing but grass and roots, and doing nothing but weeping and wailing over the loss of his beloved wife, which subtly turns his relationship with Rapunzel into a marriage. Although Tangled doesn't follow the source material all that closely, you can see a more grim, accurate version of the story in another Disney movie, Into the Woods. There are several nods to the original Rapunzel story in Tangled. For one thing, Disney kept the name Gothel from the original story. Disney nods at the original story's opening by opening their film with the king and queen's search for a magic flower. Disney also utilized the colors of a Rapunzel blossom in the design of the Tangled Kingdom's flag. The Grimm brothers wrote that Rapunzel wrapped her hair around a window hook when she helped Gothel up into the tower, and that's the same method she uses in the movie. The original also describes Rapunzel as letting out her braids when she uses her hair. Rapunzel gets her hair braided in Tangled during the kingdom dance scene. While Rapunzel doesn't give birth to twins in Tangled, there is a pair of twins in the movie. Flynn Rider's accomplices, the Stabbington brothers, appear to be identical twins. In the climax, Disney cuts their heroine's hair and injures her love interest, but they flip which character is responsible for which action. Instead of the love interest injuring himself and Gothel cutting Rapunzel's hair, Gothel injures the love interest, and the love interest cuts Rapunzel's hair. Disney also kept Rapunzel's magic tears, but gave their healing power a more logical explanation, since we can assume they contain the same powers bestowed on Rapunzel's hair by the magic flower. So, what do you think of the original story? Have you read the Grimm brothers' version of Rapunzel before? And if so, which one do you like better, Tangled or the Grimm brothers version? Please let me know in the comments, and don't forget to let me know which Disney movie you would like me to compare with its source material next. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and follow me on Instagram, and as always, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.